Welcome back to the third episode of our Proverbs series. I'll be reading from Proverbs 10, verses 4 through 5, and I'll be looking at the ESV version. If you want to choose a different one that suits your taste, there's certainly those, or compare. That's always good. Again, I'll be using the ESV version. We'll be looking at Proverbs 10, 4 through 5. A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. Now again, if you want to use a different translation, it might make a little more sense, use more modern terms. The ESV is a little more of what they would call a literal, kind of a word-for-word translation. Again, not 100% because this is modern English and this was written in Hebrew, so of course very different. So it's always good to, again, have several different translations you look at. So what about the context here? Because again, unless you're a farmer, unless you live in that kind of society, you're not going to have a lot of reference points here. Even though you might have some understanding about planting and harvest, these people really understood the importance of planting when it was time to plant and harvesting when it was time to harvest. Now again, that might sound simple, deceptively simple, but there's a lot here for us to unpack, and I'm going to try to limit this video, of course, to about 10 minutes. But let's take a look at this. They had an awareness of the seasons, for what? The seasons and the rhythms of life. And of course, we have electric lighting here. Obviously, it's nighttime, it's dark this time of year, this time. Back then, if it was dark, you usually went to sleep because, again, they didn't have electric lighting. They had fires they could light and candles and those kind of things. But again, they wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have done that all the time, for sure. They were aware of these rhythms, and of course, planting and harvest were very important for survival. So this is life or death. This is life or death, knowing the right action to take at the right time. And I don't want to sound dramatic, but it really is for us as well. Our life is made up of seasons. Different parts of our life have different seasons, and of course, we also experience the seasons. And depending on what part of the world you're in, that's, of course, different at different times of the year, but we're aware of the seasons and the rhythms of life around us and our own rhythms, a circadian rhythm that tells us when to go to sleep, when it gets dark, and all that. This required a lot of hard work, for sure. Planting and harvesting and that kind of farm work, that required a lot of hard work, but also a lot of faith that what you planted would grow and you would be able to harvest it. Because again, if you didn't really have a choice. You had to plant anyway, but if it didn't work out, you would be without food. And again, most of us only have about 2 weeks worth of food left in our kitchen at any given time. Of course, that's probably changed a little bit with recent events and people being aware of how fragile our systems really are and why people should stock up on things. And again, I'm not saying being a full-out prepper, but prepping makes sense in a sense because, again, there's this acknowledgement of that they were really aware of that, when the food ran out, you were dependent on your neighbor, you were dependent on somebody to provide for you. So they needed faith, faith that God would make sure they would have a good harvest. And this goes back to some of the temptations they also faced in that land. Again, we're talking about 3,000 years ago, but a lot of the gods of the peoples who lived in that area were fertility gods who obviously having kids and that kind of thing, but also the earth and growing things. And so there was this strong temptation to, well, maybe, I'll worship God, the God, but also maybe, maybe I'll give an offering to these idols and kind of cover my bases, hedge my bets there with that. So we kind of understand that, but it took a lot of faith to really be directly dependent on nature. And again, even though we might not be as aware of it, we also are very much dependent on nature. And again, if something disastrous were to happen, cataclysmic, if an asteroid were to hit Earth and destroy everything, if we didn't die in the asteroid, it would kill all the crops, and eventually we would run out of food. And that's kind of scary, but the point of this isn't to scare us. The point of it is to show us the importance of not only being diligent and having a good work ethic, and as the saying goes, make hay while the sun shines. I think that's what it is. But they have a lot of these sayings that, it's strike while the iron's hot. Taking the right action at the right time is essential. Of course, taking action, period, is a skill. And it's like a muscle to build. And again, that's a good place to start. But we also need to work smart. Work hard and also work smart. Because if you aren't acting in accordance with the seasons and you don't have the awareness of what's going on, you might take action, but again, it might not be the most beneficial action at the time. What could be more perfect of an example than planting and harvest? Because it's clear that at a certain time of year you plant, and then at a certain time of year you harvest. Especially if you have winter where you can't grow anything, that's really important. So we might not feel as connected to these rhythms, and again, a lot of that has to do with our modern life, electric lighting, and just a general disconnect from the food we eat. Unless you're growing your own food or hunting your own animals and all that, you're not going to have this deep connection to the food that you're eating unless you really consciously try to do that. And again, this isn't about that specifically, but again, that's a good thing to do. But this is talking about acting in the right time at the right place. Acting at the right time and the right place. Of course, there's a time and a place for everything. So what are the real applications for us here in 2021 when I'm making this video? Ask this question. Be aware of the moment, be present in the moment, and ask this question and really pray about this, because this is, again, this takes a lot of wisdom to do, and this isn't just something we're supposed to figure out on our own. This takes wisdom. What is the best thing I can do right now? So don't worry about, on the other side of that, don't worry about things that are in the past or in the future that you could have done this but you didn't, or you have this in the future that you need to do but you can't do anything about it right now. Focus on what you can do right now, what season you're in, and take the right action. And have faith that God will take care of things. As long as you're doing your part, taking the actions you need to take. Of course, prayer is a great thing, and we need to pray. But if we just pray and we don't take any action, of course, God sometimes provides things that we didn't do any work for, but for our part, the world and everything is designed that we take action. And again, it's not an easy thing to do. It sounds really simple, it sounds really straightforward, but taking action, let alone acting at the right time, and even saying the right thing at the right time, takes a lot of wisdom. And nobody is perfect at it, but it is something that we can improve at. It's something that we can seek wisdom on, and it's something we can pray about, and it's certainly something we need to. And looking at recent events, having an awareness of the times and what is going on is so much more important. Getting the right facts about things. And again, being aware of our own limitations and assumptions and biases. That's all very important. Making sure you're getting good information and reliable sources to really be able to read the times and to read the situation. And this can be something as simple as, if you are meeting with someone or talking with someone, having an awareness of what's going on in their life and what kind of state of mind or mood they're in. Maybe it's the right time to say this, but not this. And again, they could be two true things that the person needs to hear, but there's always a good time for one thing, right? So don't worry about what you can't control. And that's kind of that's the relief. We have the opportunity right here and right now to take action with something, but also we shouldn't be filling our mind with things that are outside of our control. And what could be more outside of our control than something that isn't in the present moment with us? And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't plan. Of course, planting and harvesting and all that took a lot of planning. They had to plan, all right, this is what I'm going to grow, this is where I'm going to plant it. That took a lot of planning, but it involves specific actions in each season. So learn from this. Take the right action at the right time and seek the wisdom to do that. On the other side, again, don't worry about what you can't control. And also, give thanks. That's another point here. It just reminds me of how grateful we should be. And I think a lot of people have woken up to that recently, especially with things, realizing, again, how fragile everything is. Our human systems that we have in place, and how we are really dependent on God, just like they were. We're just as dependent on God as they were, not just spiritually, but to provide for us physically. And again, they were very much aware of that, and we are no different from that. So give thanks and be aware of what's going on. And of course, famine is still a reality in many parts of the world. Every part of the world, people are going hungry and people are in need. See what you can do for those. See what kind of actions you can take for them right now to serve others in some way. And again, that's kind of general advice, and Proverbs gives this general advice, but it takes prayer and wisdom to apply this specifically. And in looking at this and the events of recent days, I can't think of any proverb that's more relevant for us right here and right now, especially starting the new year. And maybe make this a New Year's resolution. Try to focus on each moment, each season, and pray and get the wisdom to decide on what you should do right now, and then take action.